Sorry about that. I'm working here by myself. My name is Jim Reveley. I'm a professor at Robert Morris University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Also the former editor of the Journal of Accounting Education. Was editor from 1998 until 2010. Also one of the co-authors of the Accounting Education Lit Review series that appeared in the Journal of Accounting Education. And I was co-author when I wasn't editor of the journal, and also when I was editor, I reviewed and helped edit the papers. I would like to thank Edgard for the opportunity to prepare this video about the importance of accounting education research. I want to start out with talking about what the Accounting Education Journals actually publish, and basically it breaks down into two types of articles. The first would be empirical articles, and the second would be something that we call instructional resources. And included here would be cases, teaching notes, and teaching notes are generally where faculty share some innovative thing that they've done in their classes. Both types of articles are important to the literature, but not enough empirical research has been done in accounting education research over the last, particularly over the last 10 years. And a few years ago, Doug Moser published an article in Accounting Horizons about stagnation in accounting research. And Moser was basically talking about financial accounting, and some of his main arguments were that researchers are tweaking the same basic research questions, which makes relatively minor incremental contribution to the literature, and that there's maybe too much focus on the research method as opposed to the research question. And we find something similar in accounting education literature. The Lit Review articles have shown us that more than 60% of the published papers fall into a category called curriculum and instruction. And few of those articles are actually related to the accounting curriculum, which has stayed pretty much fairly constant here in the U.S. Since I was an undergraduate in the late 1970s. We have the same basic 6 courses. Some of the textbooks are the same best-selling textbooks, things like that. So, and going back to the accounting education literature, there's been little incremental contribution to the literature over the past 10, 20 years from the research that's been done. I want to say that there's no contribution, but when you have so many articles on the same topic, and there are so many other research questions to look at, the contribution of the literature to, let's say, the practice of accounting education has not met with what the expectations should be. Going back with the stagnation issue, the one difference between financial accounting research and accounting education research is that in accounting education, the research question is much more important than the research method. We don't expect that people are going to use highly sophisticated research methods, that they're going to have a lot of data that are going to be analyzed multiple ways. That's not the expectation in accounting education. When I was editor of the Journal of Accounting Education, the primary thing that I considered was whether the research question was relevant and whether it was important. If not, then why would journal subscribers be interested in the article? Because they weren't really going to learn anything unless somebody was looking at an important, relevant research question. Now, I'm not suggesting or saying that the research method is unimportant. That's not true. It certainly is important. The results have to be reliable, for an article to be published and for it to make a contribution. But having reliable results for a research question that is not relevant or not important, it doesn't really make a contribution to the literature. And so finding out that students don't like, doing an empirical study to find out that students don't like PowerPoint presentations doesn't really help us, advance accounting education. So what are some important research questions in accounting education? And these are just a few things that I jotted down, that have occurred to me recently. The first is probably our students, the millennials and the next generation of accounting students. Today's students don't study like I did, and they don't seem to learn like I did. When I was an undergraduate, I would study the textbook. I worked and reworked problems to apply what I learned in the textbook, what I learned in the class, and that was how I learned accounting. Was reading a book and working and reworking problems. Today's students, though, the textbook is almost irrelevant. It's not clear to me how many of our students actually read the textbook, and spend time with it. Their attention span is not, does not lend itself to sitting there for an hour, let's say, and reading about, financial accounting or cost accounting or auditing. Today's students, their brains are just not wired to do this. They're used to being bombarded with text messages, with tweets, with information from Facebook or phone calls or whatever it might be, and they have to constantly be in contact. And so they're not, many of them are not able to sit still for an hour and read an accounting textbook. So the challenge is that, in accounting education and for the researcher, how can we effectively engage this and the next generations of accounting students in the learning process? Certainly, I can't teach the way that I did, the way that I learned. It's just not going to work with today's students. So how do faculty need to change to help, this current generation of accounting students learn? And so those are some, the students are basically the most important part of the educational process. And we don't know enough about today's students and how they learn. And again, empirical research is needed on some of these issues. Technology. Probably about 20 years ago, I started asking for articles on the effective use of technology for student learning. So when I would give presentations or be on panel sessions when I was an editor, I would ask, who has examples of how technology can help students learn. And certainly we have some articles now that help us answer this question, not just in accounting education, but outside of accounting. But by and large, I think educators are still looking for ways to effectively use technology in the learning process. This is an area of research that's absolutely critical. And it's not an accounting education problem, it's a higher education problem. But accounting educators, since we use technology and accountants use technology, are in maybe a better position than some other areas to help contribute answers to the questions about how we can use technology to facilitate learning. But certainly, this is an area where much more empirical work is needed. Related to that would be online classes. Many schools are trying to get into the online education market, primarily because it broadens the student base and brings in more revenue. And these courses that are called MOOC courses, the massive open online classes, to me have the potential to disrupt higher education, including accounting education. And I recently read an article where a vice president at Google, who is also a Stanford professor, offered a MOOC course on artificial intelligence, and 160,000 people signed up for it and took that class, which is incredible, if you think about how many universities that might hold. So, do MOOC courses have the potential for teaching students in accounting, particularly, students in, say, introductory financial accounting that may have had in their high school years, may have had a bookkeeping course or something like that. Are these students be able to learn financial accounting online through an open access course? Many of our students that take intro financial, intro managerial are non-accounting majors. What they need to know from that class is a bit more limited than what accounting students need to know. But what potential is there from these for these open access courses, these MOOC courses, to provide instruction in the basics of accounting? And finding an answer to that would certainly help, the accounting faculty shortage that we see. The flipped classroom, this idea of the flipped classroom where students learn the basics online and, then apply that when they're in the classroom, I think has great potential for accounting education. So a research question would be, can the flipped classroom work in accounting courses, and how might that happen? And it would seem that this approach of the basics outside of the classroom online, and then reinforcing what the students have learned, would have applications throughout the accounting curriculum. So that's another area that I think that's worth looking at. And these again are just a few ideas. There are many more ideas for accounting empirical studies and other types of accounting articles, accounting education articles. I think today that accounting education is probably changing more dramatically than at any time in my career. The changes that are occurring in students, technology, how courses are delivered, how students learn, provide a lot of opportunities for research, empirical research in accounting education. And I do hope that you take advantage of these opportunities to contribute not just to the literature, but to how we educate accounting students. And I really can't think of anything that's more important from a research standpoint than that. How can, conducting research that improves the education that we provide to our students, while maybe not using the most sophisticated research methods, could have the greatest contribution. Again, I hope that you take the opportunity to conduct some meaningful, important studies in accounting education to contribute to the literature, but also contribute to students' learning. Again, thank you for the opportunity to communicate with you about the importance of accounting education research. I hope I gave you a few ideas to think about. If you would like to continue to converse with me, I'd be happy to do so. Probably the easiest way to reach me would be on my email, which is rebele, R-E-B-E-L-E, @rmu.edu. Again, thank you very much.